So here we are with our SAP GUI open. And the first thing we're going to do is find the data dictionary in the SAP menu. So open up the Tools menu, choose the ABAP Workbench. Under Development, you'll then see SE11 for the ABAP dictionary. Double click it, and you'll then be presented with the first screen for the ABAP dictionary. So let's go through the different options that we see on the screen. The first one we see is Database Tables. This is where we can enter an existing table name, followed by a display to have a look at the technical components of the table. Then we have Views. A view is similar to a table, but all it is a table structure. It doesn't contain any data. Then we have Data Types. Data types are what can make up our database tables, and we'll have a look at those soon. We have Type Groups, Domains, Search Help, and Look Objects. Let's focus on creating a table first of all. So what we want to do is click on the Database Table option, and in this exercise we're going to focus on creating a transparent table. There are other types of tables, such as cluster tables and pool tables, but you don't need to know about those just now. All we want to do is create a transparent table. And when we create our table, we need to ensure our table name adheres to the customer-defined namespace. And this means we need to start our tables with the letter Z or the letter Y. Most commonly, you'll see the letter Z being used. So for our example, we're going to create a table that will list employees within a company. In the Database Tables field, enter Z Employees and click the Create button. This new screen appears and the cursor is on the short text field. All we need to do here is enter a description for our table. Just type in employees. Now under the short text you can see various tabs, and the one that's highlighted at the moment is the Delivery Maintenance tab. For the Delivery class, click on the field and click the drop-down button. This shows you a list of delivery classes that you can choose for your table. Have a read through, but the one we want to choose is Application Table, because we're going to hold master data or transaction data in the table that we are creating. And in the Data Browser / Table View Maintenance field, click the drop down again and choose Display Maintenance Allowed. This will allow us later on to enter data directly into the table. And before we go any further, click the Save button. Now this window pops up, Create Object Directory Entry. Now what this is all about is any development we do within the SAP system. Quite often we do the development in our development environment, and we have to move the development through to our quality assurance environment and then through to production. And this window allows us to choose the development class, which has config behind it the actual transport route that we want to use for our development. But in our case, we're just running through this example scenario and we don't want to move our developments into another system. So all we need to do is click Local Object, and what will happen is you will see $temp appear as the development class. And that means to the system, this object is only to exist in our development environment and we do not wish to transport it any further. So click the Local Object button and we can see down at the status bar at the bottom of the screen, our table has been saved. Now if you go to the Go-To menu and choose Object Directory Entry, we can then see the Change Object Directory Entry pop-up box, which is very similar to the previous one. We can see that the development class has been changed to $temp. Close that window. So the next thing we want to do is start entering the field names for our table. There are a few guidelines that we need to keep in mind when creating fields within our table. Firstly, our field names can start with any letter at all. They do not have to begin with a Z or a Y like our table names themselves. The field names can have a maximum of 16 characters. Our tables must have at least one key field. This is used later on for searching and sorting of data, and they identify each record as being a unique record. You can assign an initial value to a field. Let's say in our example, we had an employee class. Let's say the majority of our employees are going to be regular staff. So let's say we have an initial value of S for staff, but we do have some employees that are directors. Maybe they have a code of D. So we can say our initial value would always be an S, but allow the user to change the value to a D later on. Every field that we use in our table is made up of what we call a data element. And the data element defines specific attributes of each field. One word of warning here, data elements must adhere to the customer namespace again. So they must, for anything new that we create, begin with the letter Z or Y. So let's start off with entering our first field. And the field we're going to create is a very important field within an SAP system. It's the field that identifies the client that our records are associated with. So in the field name, enter client. And the data element, we will enter MANDT. Now the data element already exists in the system. And when I press enter after entering it, you can see the system automatically filled in the data type, the length, number of decimals, short text for the actual data element itself. Now very important, we need to ensure that the client field is made a key field within our table. The next field we're going to enter is going to be our own created field. And this is going to be employee. Again, we're going to make this field a key field. And we're going to use a brand new data element called SEENUM. Once you have done this, click the Save button. I always like to save the table as we go along. Now the next thing is SEENUM does not exist, so we have to create the data element. So even though it's let us enter it here, if we try to activate the table or just check the table, we should see an error message, and we do. So basically, because we haven't got a data element called SEENUM already existing in the system, it's telling us we cannot activate this table and use it within our system. So press F3 or the back button, and then we're going to use forward navigation to create the data element. Another way of doing it is to open up a brand new session, go to SE11 again, and start creating the individual objects this way. But we don't want to do that. We want to use forward navigation. And we do this just by double-clicking our brand new data element. So we get this window that appears called Create Data Elements. And it's telling us the element does not exist. Do we want to create it? Answer yes. Then we get taken to the Maintain Data Element window. Similar to the first screen that we saw when we created our table, the Data Element window is asking us for some short text. So let's enter in here Employee Data Element. Now under the short text you can see 4 tabs, and the one that's highlighted says Data Type. We can see here the elementary data type called the domain needs to be defined for our data element. Now this is important. Domains must adhere to the customer namespace. And we are going to create a brand new domain using the same name that we use for the data element. Now don't get confused. This doesn't mean there's some sort of magical relationship between the names. There isn't. We're just using the same name because that's what I've decided. So enter ZEENUM, and once again we're going to use forward navigation to create the domain. So double click the entry. It's telling us our data element has changed and do we want to save it before creating our domain. Choose yes. We get the Create Object Directory entry window appearing again. And just as before, we want to save this development to the $temp development class. So you can either just click the Save button or just click the Local Object button. So now because we've used forward navigation, it's telling us that the new domain we are trying to create does not exist. Choose yes to create the domain. And once again, enter some short text that describes what the domain is going to be used for. So we will just enter employee domain. Under the short text, we can see 3 tabs, and the one that's highlighted says Definitions. The fields available to us, the first one says Data Type. Click the drop down on Data Type. You will see lots of generic data types already exist within the ABAP dictionary, and we can use one of these for our employee field or domain. We're going to choose num-c, which is a character string with only digits. So double click the entry and that fills in the data type field for us. In the number of characters, enter 8, which means this field is going to contain a maximum of 8 characters. And we want zeros for decimals, which is the default anyway for a num-c field. Select an output length of 8 and just hit the enter key. We can see here that where we have entered the num-c, it has brought back the description of this field, which tells us it's a valid entry.